Searching for Jazmín. It happened on a September day of a year I can't remember. As I walked to school, she wasn't waiting for me at our usual spot. At home, at school, in our village, it was rumored that she had left with her family to an uncharted town in the United States. But the silence that ensued after they spoke the news was oppressive and incoherent, and all other traces of her existence seemed to have vanished. Even when I came to the United States, I was unable to track her whereabouts. My childhood and teenage years all yielded to one single passion, one single hope. The hope that if Jazmín was still alive, I would see her again in flesh and bone. But the day never came, and I turned into a man who yearned for the magic that her existence imparted. Eventually, the love that I had for her became a haunting ghost, a silver image made of moonlight. About a year ago, a medieval fair came to small town Cedardale. It was a silly simulacrum of medieval times. It ran mostly during daytime and, as night approached, instead of streetlights, fire torches and fire pits were set up to illuminate our view. The abundance of mock fortune tellers attracted my attention, and I approached a tent in which a gypsy-like slender woman, dressed in black, held toward me a small round stone, an amulet of sorts. The stone shone like a star in silver silence with streaks of gold fashioned by the fire's reflection. Withdrawing the amulet into her hand, the gypsy spoke. "For $5, I will answer a question that foretells your future." Perhaps she perceived how little I believed in such nonsense, because after a pause she added, "Never mind, I will answer one question for free." Then in a whisper, as if to herself, "If ever a man needed to foresee his future, it's you." Feeling conscious about how rude my skepticism must have portrayed me, I said, "I'll pay the fee. I do want one question answered." "This amulet reminds you of her, doesn't it?" she said, revealing once again the stone. "The silver shimmer is the beauty of her face." My skepticism diminished when she said this, because indeed, anything silver had always reminded me of Jazmín's fair face under sunlight. Then I laughed it off. How absurd for a grown man to think such nonsense might have some truth in it. I played her game nonetheless. I sat on the mahogany chair set up for customers to sit, facing the gypsy across a table. Her dark eyes caught the fire's flickering dance that peered in from the outside as she whispered, "Are you ready to face the road that lies ahead? The magic, the mundane?" "Yes," I replied, feeling a sullenness come over me. She shuffled some worn-out cards as she kept her eyes fixed on me, expecting, I suppose, the question that I would ask. My heartbeat grew, and my throat tightened as I asked the question. Will I ever see Jazmín again? This was the question that I'd harbored in my heart for more than a decade. Speaking it to someone else overwhelmed me with a sense of imprisonment rather than liberation. My heartbeat increased for several seconds more, then slowly decreased its tempo until I could only feel a faintness and a cold and sweaty brow. "You will see her in 3 different ways," she said. "This is the first one." She slid her left hand across the table slowly, and my heart began to beat again, quicker and louder than before. At length, the purple and black glimmer of her fingernails lay before me. The wind outside her tent began to pick up, and a shrill, swift sound resonated as it entered through the openings. The fire from the torches and fire pits cast in its glow with greater vibrancy, setting above her eyes in a pyrotechnic show. With her right hand, she produced again the silver stone that for a moment seemed fiery gold. "This amulet holds the power to help you see her." She handed it to me, and then, slowly and ceremoniously unveiled a card she covered with her left hand. Within the card, inscribed to clear perfection, was the image that I had tried to conjure in memory for more than a decade. It was Jazmín without a doubt. Her childish frame was draped in a diaphanous green dress embroidered with vines of flowery white. The same dress she'd worn to school the first day we met. Her angelic face shone with white light, making her full-fleshed crimson lips, dark eyes, and silken silent hair project an image of beauty unparalleled by anything else that exists in this world. In the image, Jazmín was looking askance toward the left, as if gazing at something or someone off camera. Her dimpled smile made her sweet beyond comparison. There seemed to be an aura of light around her. I was speechless, breathless, as part of my mind tried to comprehend the travesty and another part tried to take in the image and its beauty. A gust of wind outside threw embers in the directions of the skies, which brought me back to the mundane. A fireman was telling the vendors that the fire pits and torches would be put out due to fire danger because of the unexpected winds. The fair would continue, but with streetlights on instead. I noticed a fire extinguisher inside the gypsy's tent and the tent's brand name tag. I gasped when I looked toward one corner of the tent and saw, for the first time, a child with silver face crouched in silence. At once I thought she was an angel, Jazmín, a demon, or a changeling from fairyland. But I decided I was wrong. It was likely the gypsy's daughter or a relative of sorts. All these sordid details overwhelmed me and led to a buzzing sound like beehives in my head. I wanted beauty again. I wanted magic. But I fear returning my gaze to the card and not seeing Jazmín's image there again. I looked at the gypsy's presupposed daughter so as to keep myself from looking at the card and finding disillusionment. You must take that image with you. The gypsy broke the silence between us. That image of innocence and beauty. Hold on to it, for it is the only thing that will lead you back to Jazmín. Take both the image and the amulet. Encouraged by this, I looked at the card again, and Jazmín's radiant, innocent smile was still there. I paid and thanked the gypsy woman, leaving her tent with a strong sense of wonder. But I also felt fear. A fear that heightened as I exited the fairgrounds and started walking home in the dark shadows of the street. The wind increased its force as warm drops of rain began to fall. That night, during a sleepless spell, I was stirred to fear by a faint knock upon the window of my room. The second time I heard it, I inched a blanket toward my face as if hiding myself from the dangers of the world. By the third time, I picked up an apparent pattern in the intervals of the knock, so I inferred it must have been a tree's branch all along. I sat up on my bed and saw the shadow of the oak tree outside through the opaque window moving to and fro with the wind. I walked over and opened the window to verify what I had already concluded. Indeed, some regular gusts of wind were blowing the branches toward the window. The rain had stopped and there was an earthy musk, much as those that so often happened after rains in my native land. Before I returned to bed, I pulled out the card with Jazmín's image, which I had placed between pages 22 and 23 of my 1992 pocketbook's edition of Wuthering Heights. I retrieved the amulet from a drawer. I held both the image and the amulet tightly against my chest for what must have been an hour until at length I fell asleep. A loud bang followed by jolting and scratching at the window woke me up. I sat up quickly and gazed at the window, trying to detect the shadows of the oak tree branches moving once again. But the wind seemed to have ceased, for their shadows were still, and a stifling funereal silence had settled in. Whatever caused the noise was not perceptible anymore, only a mild glow entered the room. Then, as if my mind had willed it, a sudden distinct silhouette appeared within the frame of the window. I watched it linger. My heart's rate began to increase as the silhouette continued to linger. In my agitation, I began gasping for quiet breaths, and then it was gone. The figure beyond the window was gone, but to my horror, I heard a screech and observed as the shape of the window latch began to unlock slowly. Feeling a threat to my physical well-being, a survival instinct moved me to jump out of my bed. Disoriented by the partial darkness, I nearly fell as I reached the window. I managed to lock the latch and held it tight with my left hand. "Whoever you are, you must go now," I said in a firm tone. "I'm calling the police." "Please help me," a child's voice responded, and a chill came over me. "I need to see you." Within an instant, the silhouette returned. Reaching across the window and shattering the glass, its hand grabbed my right wrist with such strength that I was unable to unlock its grasp. In the midst of my frantic shrieks and cries, I unwittingly pulled its hand in and shook it as such that it ended up cutting itself with the broken glass of the window pane. I was finally released, and I stared in terror at the window pane on which vermilion slowly slid like dewdrops. Then her face peered in through the broken glass, and she was crying. "Please help me," she said. "Jazmín?" I questioned. "Don't you love me anymore? Why would you hurt me?" "Jazmín, it's really you," I said as I stared at her intently through the darkness and broken glass. I hesitated, but when I did open the window, Jazmín was holding onto one of the oak tree branches, her white dress smeared with blood. She smiled and said, "Do you remember when we used to climb the huizache tree beside your house in Mexico?" An overwhelming sense of joy filled me, and I held out my hand to help her in. She jumped onto the window ledge, and from there onto my arms, and we embraced as soulmates that have searched the entire world for each other. And we both cried. "I've waited for you all my life, Jazmín," I exclaimed. As I held her in my arms, she inched herself away from me so that we faced each other. And I saw, this time in real flesh, the beauty of her facial features cast with shadows as she smiled at me. Shortly, she put her head on my chest and started shaking with stifled sobbing. I patted her shoulder and head gently and hushed her as a father would do with his daughter when she's ill. She then looked up with pleading eyes and said, "Where is the amulet? I must have it." I put her down and made my way to the light switch and turned aghast when I saw the lacerations on her arm caused by our previous altercation. I offered assistance, but she said, "No, these wounds will go away, but the damage caused by not having the amulet will never be surmounted." She then proceeded with, "I am only a version of Jazmín. Jazmín exists in different ways. I am trapped in this body right now. The amulet is the substance that will set me free." The words of the gypsy came to me and filled me with apprehension. "This amulet holds the power to help you see her." "Will I ever see you again if I give it to you?" I asked. "You will always remember me the way I look today and every memory we made together." "What if I don't give it to you? You will see Jazmín once more, in Mexico. A different version of her, a version you have not seen yet. I am the one you knew last, exactly the same as when we saw each other for the last time. If you don't give me the amulet, my soul will be cursed to wander every mountain and every valley searching for you. I will never find you again." She paused, then added emphatically, "But don't you love me? Won't you save me?" I sat on the bed feeling shaky and faint. I hung my head down. My right hand, as if by a magnet, was drawn to the amulet on the bed. I grabbed it, contemplated and clenched it tight. I didn't want this to be our last goodbye. I debated, yet ultimately resolved that I would free this Jazmín, my Jazmín. When I looked up, ready to surrender the amulet, the room was empty. Empty as I had always felt without my eternal and elusive Jazmín. I threw myself onto the bed, and as I reached for the card with her image, I was shaken to see that in the picture, Jazmín was not looking askance but straight, as if staring into my soul with a reproachful stare. Her smile was gone. Early the following morning, as I packed a duffel bag, I heard a knock at my door, and then my mother spoke. "Mijo," she said through the door, "please let me in." The broken glass still lay on the floor like silver diamonds. I opened the door and let my mother in. She looked at the mess without surprise in her eyes. "¿Qué pasa, mijo?" she asked with pity in her voice, her usual consternation. "Nothing," I replied. "I'm going to Mexico. Someone told me Jazmín is going to be there, and I'm going to go search for her. I'm taking the Greyhound to the border." "Oh, my son, haven't we gone through this already?" She paused and looked at me with her compassionate eyes. "Jazmín passed away, mijo. She's buried in the graveyard in the mountains of Santa Ynez, next to her mom and dad. They died in the car crash just a mile before they got to their new home here in Cedardale." In that instant, every moment of hope I'd had, every fantasy I designed yielded to an impassioned sense of surrender cast by the malevolent truth which, unwillingly, I seemed to have already known. Nonetheless, I yelled, "It's not true, it can't be," and cried disconsolately. "It's true, mijo. That's really what happened," my mother replied. "How come I can't remember her funeral then?" "People in our village knew how much you cared for each other. They helped us keep it a secret. Soon after, we came to Cedardale, where there's almost no one from our village. Your dad and I continued keeping the secret, and you never really asked about her. We thought you'd forgotten her." There was an interval of silence. "You learned about her death only a few months ago." "But the gypsy told me I'm going to see her again," I said, laughing, and pulled the card from within the pages of Wuthering Heights. "She gave me a card with a picture of her. She must know her. She must know she's alive and well." When I looked at the card, it wasn't Jazmín's image anymore, but the image of the Grim Reaper. Dusk approached as I started trekking up the mountains of Santa Ynez, and, on my way, I met a traveler from a different village. "Going treasure hunting?" he asked, pointing at the shovel and pickaxe that I carried. "Something like that," I replied and grinned. "Make sure night doesn't catch you near Las Piedras Blancas. People have seen a little girl appear in that area when there is a full moon. A spirit of sorts, like so many of us, looking for something." "Thank you, sir," I said. "I'll avoid that part of the mountains." Contrary to my words, however, I waited until it was dark so that I would reach Las Piedras Blancas. These were rock formations, boulders that lay halfway up one of the mountains, overlooking the valley of our village. They protruded out as if ready to roll or start flying. I climbed one of the biggest boulders, one that jutted out to behold the vastness below me and all its possibilities. I took the silver amulet out of my pocket. I stretched it out toward the moon and saw resemblance in their silver silence. But the silence was broken by the dissonant laughter of a child. I started laughing too, for I then realized that the amulet was the ghostly substance of my girl. I yelled, "Jazmín, ¿dónde estás?" And the laughter seemed to lead up the mountains towards the graveyard. I laughed and cried and, like a demented soul, took to jumping from boulder to boulder and then running as her laughter persisted up and up. I will see you again, Jazmín. I will see you yet again. I professed at the top of my lungs, I will set you free. And the silver moon kept shining as moths flew up into the heavens.